Okay. My name is Jamie Shaw. I'm the director of Brennan's Career Development Program here at Dominican University. We were really excited because we have a special guest with us. I'm going to let Johnathan introduce himself.
Hey everyone, my name is Johnathan Hill. I'm currently the community engagement lead for Relativity, a homegrown software tech company here in the Chicagoland area.
All right, so what we're going to be talking to you guys is this idea of leveraging a liberal arts education in your job search. So to kick things off, I'm going to turn it back over to Johnathan.
So I always think it's important, one, when talking to a group or just talking to anyone, just to introduce yourself and tell them a bit more about you. But what I thought was going to be so relevant to today's conversation is that we're talking about careers in a very broad way for a very specific and niche group. And typically it's the group that oftentimes is considered ambiguous, the business majors, the humanities majors. And to be even more specific, I was a political science major. Born and raised in Washington, D.C., and then going on to attend Morehouse College in Atlanta, Georgia. If I could be very transparent with the group, I thought that I would be sitting in office by now. My senior year, after, let's just say, interning in a few places and finding it very interesting that government and civic engagement were not necessarily intertwined as much as I thought, I just knew I was going to have a career there. So 2 weeks from graduation, I actually began to raise money to run for a councilmanship seat in Washington, D.C., and I raised about $20,000. Now, that may sound like a lot to the group, but needless to say, the other candidates that I was looking at running against, they had $400,000 and $500,000. I quickly realized that that was not the time for me to start running for office. And the two things that I needed most was, one, to create capital for myself because a brother needed money. And two, I needed to also start thinking about my network, recognizing that there's so much power in who you know, especially if you leverage them the right way. I then went on to actually begin my career at LinkedIn through my network, having met a recruiter on campus, literally was pressing a grill across the grass in a tank top and shorts, saw a lady in a blue shirt, walked up to her and told her my dreams, told her my aspirations to create economic opportunity for the communities that I came from. And she told me that LinkedIn was doing this at scale. Because of that conversation, she picked up the phone, called the director of our program. I had my first job at LinkedIn, starting in sales, stayed at that company for 3 years, starting in San Francisco, came to Chicago, and really started to fall in love with the opportunity to create impact at scale. Before our now CEO Relativity started calling me over saying, hey, I have this cool, wacky idea to tap, in those communities that have been traditionally overlooked, individuals to recruit, train, and certify in our environment and give them full-time jobs and careers. Needless to say, I took an intelligent risk on my career and now I'm at Relativity, and this now makes 2 months today.
All right, so believe it or not, this is not a self-portrait of myself. This is actually a self-portrait of Messina Barton. So she was a 20th century portraitist, and some of you may know this, but some of you don't. So my undergraduate degree is in the history of art and architecture and women's and gender studies. So I was studying feminist art history as an undergrad at DePaul University. So a lot of times people go, wait, what? What did you study? And how are you in a business school now, right? And working in career development. And so one thing that I wanted to make sure to highlight is that through my training from a liberal arts college, right? So the art history and gender studies programs were both housed within the liberal arts college at DePaul University. And I'm bringing this up because the training that you get from a liberal arts education, which is what all of you guys are getting at Dominican University. So some of those soft skills that you're getting are absolutely crucial and critical within the workplace today. So as an art history major and as a gender studies major, I was looking at things like, how do we include a traditionally marginalized artist? Because I'm sure none of you have heard of Messina Barton. Correct me if I'm wrong. But how do you include a traditionally lost and marginalized artist within the canon of art history? And so how do we get Messina Barton's artwork up in the walls at the Art Institute of Chicago, where she rightly deserves to be? And so those were some pretty challenging questions. And you're thinking about, oh my God, different issues, right? Feminism, all stuff, sexism. You're looking at underrepresented groups and thinking about how to appropriately include them within this canon. Or do you want to include them within the canon? And how does that look? So anyway, all of that to say, it's a pretty complicated issue, and that required a ton of critical thinking skills. The other thing that I had to do a ton of was research. So I was looking at a ton of different artifacts, and I was writing a ton of papers, and I was presenting at conferences and things like that. So all of that to say is that I gained a ton of communication skills from my undergraduate degree, because all I was doing was writing and presenting my work. So this morning, what I did, and this I'm sure is up from this morning, I actually pulled the number of emails I have sent since I've started at Dominican University. So we can go ahead, and if you guys want to guess how many emails I have written in my role, and I started in August of 2016. So if you want to use the chat and just take a wild guess how many emails that was, or how many emails I've sent as of this morning. Jonathan's got 35,000, including Jamie's jobs. Yes. 40,000. Okay. 7,600. Anna, I work harder than that. So the grand total, 37,123. Okay. That's a whole lot of emails. That's a whole lot of writing. And so my point is that I use those skills that I gained from my liberal arts education every day in the workplace, right? We can get into at some point, if you'd like, either privately or later on in this call. I don't want to spend too much time on how I ended up in the Brennan School of Business, but know that I use the skills I gained every day. And so Johnathan and I were talking about this idea of soft skills and technical skills and different things that people want to see in the workplace, right? So I mentioned that I have to give presentations a lot in my job. Well, look what the number one top skill is identified as having a shortage in the Chicagoland area from LinkedIn, right? So I'm going to let Johnathan jump in here because I'm sure he has a ton to say about this topic.
No, I really appreciate you bringing this up again, Jamie. In my time at LinkedIn for the past 3 years, it's really been focused on helping, companies and organizations leverage the LinkedIn platform to find people who have particular skills. So when you think about the way that actual employers are looking for their talent, again, thinking just 2 months ago before a huge pandemic, there was a low job market. It meant that, again, around 3% of people were considered to not have employment or be underemployed. And given that it was a tight job market, they were looking for people with particular skills to do the job. Now we're in a market, especially given COVID-19 and its impact and effect, where over 26 million people in the US alone are looking for a job. And given this large candidate pool, employers are only looking, again, to find a needle in the haystack. They aren't looking to hire 26 million people. They're going to look for people who can do the job that they need right now and not need much training. Or if they do need training, they need to know what skills they already have. So again, thinking of the idea of what are your technical skills, what are your hard skills, what are your soft skills, which we now relatively are calling your power skills, it's all of it combined. When you think about just your everyday interaction, from oral communication to leveraging social media, whether it be for a business or for personal life, being able to articulate that to an employer is key and it's vital. And then secondarily, being able to articulate, even if I don't have certain technical or hard skills or experiences, what are ways in which I've gone about receiving those? Or secondarily, what are ways in which I've tried to get a similar experience that I can leverage to do that job?
Yeah, and the one thing I want to make sure to add here, right? So if you break down, if you try to categorize these different buckets, 50% of these are considered soft skills and 50% are considered hard or technical skills. So something that's, I think, important to think about as you're considering your next move, maybe in your job search, or even thinking about shifting careers a bit or whatever that might be. It's really important to recognize that those soft skills are super, super critical.
And if I could add one more before we move on, the one thing I would say about those skills and also just having them visible, if you're applying to a job and you see that a job has any of these skills that they're looking for, also reflect on your own resume, reflect on your own LinkedIn profile, and think if these skills are visible there. And if they're not, go at them, especially going to reflect on the skills that you currently have or are currently working on. Add those as well to your LinkedIn profile or onto your resume so that, again, ourselves as employers will know that you have that capability.
All right. So I included this beautiful picture of some nickels at the bottom of the screen because I was saying to Jonathan yesterday, if I had a nickel for every time I had an employer that called me and said, I can train the technical skills, I can train that computer program that they need to learn to be able to do their job well. What I can't train is telling somebody how to be on time for work, communication skills. I can't train the critical thinking. And so just want to make sure to highlight that again, because I would say it has to do, oh my God, almost every call I have with an employer. I remember even working with Johnathan early on, some of these skills got brought up because they're currently recruiting for a fellows program at Relativity, right?
Yep.
Another quick story. So we had met with, it was 4 different partners from KPMG. And so now you're talking about one of the big 4 accounting firms. So I had pulled all sorts of data about our accounting program. I had gone in and looked at where are students interning, what are they learning in the classroom, what programs do they get, when are they CPA eligible, all of this different data. And so I was really looking at a lot of technical skills and then some critical data points. And we sat down for this meeting. I had all my research laid out in front of me. I was all ready to go to meet with these 4 partners. And we asked, do you have any questions about our accounting program? And the first question that they asked, they didn't care about any of the data we showed them. They didn't care about any of the different software that you might get in the accounting program. They literally pushed it kind of to the side and they said, do your students work in teams? Do they know how to communicate with each other? Which I thought was really interesting. And I'm sure Johnathan might be able to add something,
Jamie,
especially with this.
Hitting the nail on its head. If you want to be very candid in this conversation, I don't mind sharing. I think something that, again, I shared with Jamie yesterday when talking about skills in particular, one of the things that we're seeing when we're talking to a lot of the hiring managers for the teams where our fellows will be placed, is that when we ask them, what are the type of sales people that you're looking for? What are the backgrounds, the skills that they need to have? One of the things that have come up over and over again is someone who's punctual, someone who has a positive attitude, someone, again, who knows how to critically think and articulate in a concise way. Those are skills, again, that we work on every single day, that we do on every level of work. And oftentimes, again, we don't think of it as being the differentiator between me getting the job and me not receiving the job. If I can be as candid as possible, oftentimes that is the differentiator between what gives you the job and what does not. Being able to highlight that skill and being able to do it well in that conversation. I can't tell you how many times I've already had interviews. And again, our job talks about how one of the particular roles we're targeting is customer service. And I'm getting on a phone call with candidates, again, for an interview, and they're super long-winded. We can't get a question in. Oftentimes, they're not actively listening. Again, these are things that oftentimes we think about as, hey, they have to walk in the door with. We can teach them the company and the technology information. But if they can't get through this basic conversation, how can we ever expect them to get in front of one of our customers? How can we expect them to contribute to our business? How can we expect them, to Jamie's point, to work in our team? Oftentimes, again, when we think about these skills, we put them at the back, but I oftentimes would push to you and urge to you that you should really think about these at the front work.
Absolutely. And so when we're thinking about like your liberal arts education, right, and just framing this, so you're getting a broad spectrum of knowledge and skills. And so I just wanted to point out, right, we've got majors and minors and concentrations. And so if you almost want to think about that as like the technical aspects or what you're specializing in. So Ramiro Atristain gave a talk when he was talking about managing finance in your career. And he talked about this idea of becoming a specialist. And so that's what I feel like your majors and minors and concentrations are doing. And so all of that to say, I strongly feel that you can really talk about and translate a lot of the skills that you're gaining from your education in a wide variety of careers, right?
And I'll share even personally. This is something that I felt challenged with going from political science major, applying for a sales job with LinkedIn. Again, thinking about how some of the majors typically would translate as an accountant. We know that you'll become an accountant. When you say that you're an engineering major, there's a slew of roles that tell you that you will most likely become an engineer. And when you think about majoring in finance, oftentimes it's very easy to find different entry-level positions there. But when you're a political science major, management, art, history, English, oftentimes it becomes a bit ambiguous. You start scratching your head like, okay, well, I don't really know what's next. If I didn't get that internship, then what happens? I love the image that Jamie put here, because my first job actually was a barista. I worked at Starbucks. And if I could tell you, oftentimes having those conversations that I reflected on how much I paid for college, there was not enough coffee, needless to say, at that barista. So as you all think about too, just your majors and how fuzzy, again, the path forward is, know that you're not the only one going through that. And know that, again, when you think about the current C-suite executive level of the Fortune 500 companies, I dare you to see how many of them are actually humanities majors. How many are in particular English majors? Lots.
Yeah, no, for sure. Well, and I think the reason we have the required internship in Brennan now too is we want you to gain that experience so that it immediately can translate into the full-time job upon graduation. And so I think the idea is thinking about these things so that you don't end up with a $120,000 degree and you're drawing faces in your latte foam, right? So we're just trying to get you to think about and utilize those critical thinking skills to come up with ways you might be able to gain more experience so that you're getting a job, especially during this tight market. All right, so one thing that I always encourage people to do is to think about starting backwards, right? So you need to come up with a goal, and I don't want to belabor this point because Lisa Ryan gave a talk about vocational discernment and self-assessment, but it is important to think about what you want to do long-term and then kind of work your way back, right? So we have you can utilize 16 personalities is actually a free one. It takes 10 minutes. That's actually, it's the Myers-Briggs assessment. So maybe something you want to look into. Everybody knows about the Clifton Strengths Finder if you're a business student because you have to take it. We have our executives in residence that can help you with figuring out what your next step is. And then Lisa talked a ton about information interviews. What I also want you guys to think about is looking at the jobs you want to get at graduation. So go to the job board, look at those job descriptions, and see what experience they're expecting from you, right? Like if you want to work at Bosch, for example, you have got to know Excel. Well, and we're going to talk a little bit about how you might be able to gain those skills, but they also, that is like one little piece of the skill sets that they want you to bring to the table. The rest of it has to do with those soft skills and some of the other pieces that we talked about. So if it's just Excel that you've got to pick up, if you want to get a job at Bosch, again, we're going to talk about ways that you can gain that knowledge and then be able to showcase it on your resume. But the point is that go and look and see what do they want. That's the best way to figure out what your next step should be.
Before you continue, Anna has a question. It's in the comments. I'll unmute her now.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think my question, I don't know how to phrase it. I'm sorry. It goes related into translating your major, not exactly from a liberal arts, but what if you are in the Brennan School of Business and you studied management, and then you're like, I really want to do finance. So how do you translate a management into a finance, or a management into marketing? Or how do I go from marketing to, God forbid, accounting or something like that?
So I think, so one thing is that there's definitely, so let's pick on the accountants, right? The accountants, majority of the time you're going to want to get a CPA. So that's a very specific credential that you need to get to practice within that field. So some of the technical positions, for lack of better words, you're going to have to get a certain credential, and that might require additional education. But there are also ways, so again, going and I think looking at, let's say it's marketing you want to get into. So Anna, I'm going to pick on you because I know you have an internship already that you've done at the Chicago Network, and that was in marketing. And so it's thinking about like, okay, I've got this management major, but where else can I pick up experience in the marketing field if that's what I want to do, right?
Okay.
And I'm going to let Johnathan jump in, but also I want to mention that we're going to talk a bit more about where do you pick up some of those skills in just a second here.
No, I love that. And Anna, thank you as well for your question. I would just say, again, even leveraging the framework that Jamie's provided here, start backwards, right? If we want to leverage, let's say, continue down the track of marketing, that you want a career in marketing, that's the goal. I think then when you figure out what you want to do, what in particular in the function or in the act of marketing do you want to do? Do you want to get into digital marketing, copy marketing? Do you want to get into entertainment marketing? And the list can go on and on. And then from there, understand, again, if you're looking at assessments, what certain certifications, what experiences do I need to do the job? And then if I can't necessarily get that while I'm still in school, recognizing that school is expensive, you might not want to stay there as long. Okay, well, how can I go get that experience elsewhere? Are there any internships like you've already done in the surrounding area, whether they're free or not? Again, thinking about why you're leveraging your time, even if you volunteer with the organization and say, hey, unfortunately, again, I am unable to give all of my time. Can I give you 8 hours out of the week? Can I give you 4 hours out of the week? And because you did that work, no matter how much time you spent there, you can then add that experience on your resume. And I say that because as an employer, oftentimes what I'm noticing, especially from, let's say, liberal arts majors, is, I'll be honest, the odds are oftentimes stacked up against them. Because when you think about engineering or you think about some of those more finance majors, entry-level positions oftentimes exist. And when they apply, they've had 2, 3, and 4 internships before you might have had any when you were working retail. And I'm really talking about my own journey here and how I feel about it. But needless to say, that's a reality. Like, that's real. So what you do when you're faced up against that kind of wall is you have to think and reflect to yourself, okay, well, what else can I do to gain that experience? Who else within my network can help me get that experience? Hey, I know Jamie's job comes out oftentimes. Does she have any marketing support behind that? Can I help her? I know she also is thinking about doing some type of podcast. Hey, like, what kind of experiences can I get to support Jamie? And then I can now add that experience as an internship on my resume. So thinking about those information interviews, the job boards, and the experience, now you've leveraged your network to connect with people doing the job. Then you start identifying jobs in your area you can apply to. And then lastly, you got the experience because you were doing it the whole way down. I hope that was helpful.
Thank you.
And, I just want to make sure to add too, right? In the career development courses, we go through and we look at the Bureau of Labor Statistics and the Occupational Outlook Handbook. And I promise we don't just do that just to give you one more thing to do. Those resources are really great for thinking about, back to that idea of like credentials and licensing and all of that other stuff. If you want to become an engineer, for example, you might go there because they do a really great job of showing which licenses you might need in order to go into a certain field, right? So I think often if you Google like how to become, I don't know, I'm going to pick on like a social worker, for example. Sometimes they've got these short-term certification programs that you would be working in social services. And so somebody might be promoting that program, but really at the end of the day, often if you want to be a social worker, you've got to have a master's degree and you've got to have licensing behind you in order to do that. And that's why I like that, that resource that we plugged into the career development courses, because it's a great place to get some baseline knowledge about some technical skills that you might need or some licensure or whatever, the certifications and all that other stuff, right? So anyways, I think that that's also a great resource. Thinking about LinkedIn. So again, I know Mike Kiyosaki talked about this a bit in our last what was that? I can't remember, webinar number 2. But because we have somebody from LinkedIn with us, I knew we needed to talk about it. So there are two, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, Jonathan, but I think there are 260 million files of our LinkedIn profiles right now. Is that right?
So there are upwards, when I left the organization, there were upwards of 630 million people on the LinkedIn platform as of 2 months ago, still growing at 2 members per second. So think about the time that we've been on this phone call and how many members have then joined. Secondly, I, again, putting on my former hat of LinkedIn, know that the company's mission is to, again, help the global workforce be more productive and successful. So thinking about your own career journey, how can you leverage LinkedIn to, one, take advantage of the job market happening right now? And two, if you've been displaced, how can I leverage it to upskill myself so that I can begin to participate in the job market? I think some interesting things when thinking about this specific sheet is oftentimes we look at social media in different lenses. So thinking about Twitter and Facebook, and hopefully none of you have MySpace, but LinkedIn and Instagram, again, they're all relevant sources of truth depending on the action that you need to take. In particular, LinkedIn is a social network platform. Let me say that one more time. Your social network platform. What that means is that you leverage that socially to build, maintain, and then engage to leverage your network. So the first thing, again, that we recognize that you always see no matter what any of these social platforms are is you, your face. So thinking about your LinkedIn picture, that is one of the most important components of your LinkedIn profile. The platform is not based on depth, meaning, okay, well, how long is my summary? How long is my headline? It's based on completion. And with completion, you also want to stand out. So this isn't the time to have my friends, my homies, and the pictures, my dads and my family. It's really the time to showcase who you are. And then show them the face, show them the smile, shoulders up, neutral background. Secondly, thinking about the power of your network, I'll tell you something interesting about the US. Out of every, 2 out of 3 professionals in the US, 2 out of 3 of them are already on the LinkedIn platform. 92% of the US in terms of professionals are on LinkedIn. What that means is that recruiters, because they're looking for people to hire, where are they typically going to go? And we're going to talk about this obviously in the next few slides, but they're going to go to either LinkedIn to source passive talent, because that means that companies have already hired the great people. They already have the good jobs. They already have the skills. Or secondarily, again, we're going to leverage people's networks. Who do you know? So thinking about the connections that you have on your LinkedIn profile, I'll tell you all the secret number. It's okay if you know it. Don't tell anybody I told you though. It's 501. What that means is that on your LinkedIn profile, if you get to 501 professionals that you're connected with, no one else can see the number of people that are a part of your connections. And the reason why that is so important is because thinking about, again, the brand and the investment that people would have in just one individual, I'm not just hiring you. I'm also hiring you, your family, your friends, your network, because they oftentimes can not only become customers, they can become also future employees, investors, and so on. Lastly, again, when thinking about just your LinkedIn profile and social engagement, post something, engage on someone else's profile. Again, make yourself relevant to the workforce, because at the end of the day, no one knows you unless you say something. I think that was my mic drop on LinkedIn.
Mic dropped.
Thanks, Daisy.
So now we have a new goal of everybody's got to get 501 connections on LinkedIn. We're not gonna tell everybody where we got that tip from, but everybody knows that that's the goal now. We're gonna add that to the career development courses, Anna. Don't worry. All right. So thinking about building some of that experience. So you're a management major. I'm going to keep picking on Anna because she had the question. So management major, want to go into marketing. Where can you pick up more marketing skills? I talked about this very briefly during Lisa Ryan's session, but looking at project-based work is a very fast way to try to pick up some of these skills. So Upwork is one site that you can go to, as well as Parker Dewey. So Parker Dewey was really designed for college students in mind. They even frame these opportunities as mini internships, right? So they changed the way that they were selling the platform to you all because they knew that you were afraid of this idea of freelance work. So instead, they call them mini internships. It doesn't matter how you slice it. It's a gig, it's a project-based work, it's a freelance opportunity, it's a mini internship. The point is that they pay you, let's call it, I don't know, I'm gonna make this up, $500 to complete a marketing research assignment for them. They expect that it'll take, I don't know, 10 hours. Well, I might be all over that one, that's good money. But anyway, my point is that they're giving you a bite-sized project to complete, and you might be able to complete that within a week, whatever the case might be. And then you can describe that project and you can talk about what you did that is marketing work on your resume to start building those skills. So that's one way that you can start to build those experiences and also increase your network. Another thing that I want to make sure to mention are these technical skills that we were talking about. So if it's Bosch, and I'm picking on Bosch because they always tell me that they want Excel, very specifically VLOOKUP and pivot tables. Well, if I don't know that, I'm going to go and I'm going to utilize the resources that we have at Dominican University. And guess what? Every student and alumni, I just checked this morning with the alumni, you guys have access to the platform. And I'm going to let Johnathan talk a little bit more about LinkedIn Learning, but why it's so important for you to be able to utilize this tool, especially now when we're thinking about how do you differentiate yourself from another candidate going into this tight market.
No, I love that. And by a quick show of hands, if possible, I'm not looking in the space of oblivion, I'm looking at you all up here in the second monitor. How many of you have heard of the term growth mindset? All right, nice. Some haven't. That's okay. So thinking about growth mindset, there was a book that came out that talks specifically about, again, the ability of having a learning orientation and continuing your learning journey. So when thinking about growth mindset, the two differentiators was having a fixed mindset and a growth mindset. Fixed mindset, there are people that are tapped out, not looking to learn new skills. They're pretty comfortable in their role. They recognize they've gotten all they can get, and that's probably the ceiling there. Someone with the growth mindset is always looking for ways to upskill, up-level themselves, no matter the situation, the project, or who's all involved. And I think that's the approach that you would take to Jamie's point when it comes to Parker Dewey, when it comes to, Upwork, or even leveraging a system like LinkedIn Learning. It's all about how you want to up-level yourself and really practice growth mindset. At the end of the day, again, we recognize that the odds are stacked up against us. And I say us in a very specific way. Hopefully you all see it. But secondly, I think that there's another piece of the conversation that comes up when we really talk about growth mindset that says, what initiative did you take? When you didn't have the resources, again, what did you do to go find them? At Relativity, one thing that we're looking for when hiring for the fellows program, it's this term called the fire in the belly mentality. When you're in a room, you're super cold, you have no fire, no electricity or anything or resources. What will you do to make something of yourself? Who will you leverage in that space? What skills did you go out to learn so that you can perform that duty? That becomes the great story. That's what we want to hear. And then again, going back to those soft/power skills, then I heard that you're also a great communicator, being able to tell them that story. Then I can also tell that you, again, critically think about the way that you, approach certain complex problems. And lastly, I know you're solution oriented, which is also a fantastic thing. So you're not just going to sit there with the problem, you're going to work on it and try to find a resolution. That's the same way that you have to approach your education and also approach gaining experience that you might not have or might not currently be in the path that you're taking. But you can get the job.
Yeah, and the cool thing I think with LinkedIn Learning is that you can actually put that on your platform. You can showcase that you completed a course, right?
100%. So you can literally take paths, and again, when recruiters are looking at your profile, they then can see that, hey, again, Anna said that she wanted to get into marketing and might not have that as an experience of work. But then I noticed that she did 6 hours of actual learning on marketing and got a LinkedIn certification. Hey, I want to have a conversation with her because we really need help marketing and Relativity.
And then you're popping up, right? So one of our alumni, she has been, every time I turn around, I go on LinkedIn, I see that she's taken another course or learned something new on LinkedIn. And so it's been kind of cool to see the student who graduated 2 years ago She's continuing her education during this tricky time, and she's taking advantage of these resources. So now she's on the front of my mind because I see her popping up in my feed, you know. So I think that that's really important. The other thing is, you know, Elise talked a lot about managing career anxiety in our first webinar. And I think one way that you can help to, I would say, kind of get out of, you know, sometimes when we're job searching, it is really hard. I mean, quite frankly, it flat out sucks sometimes. I promise you, I'm well aware of
Most
that.
times.
It is not fun. Most times. It is not something that is fun. It is not hanging out with your friends on Friday night. It's a lot of work. And so one way that you can keep yourself active and be proud of yourself is accomplishing these kind of small bite-sized pieces, right? So if I learn how to do a new skill through LinkedIn Learning, or if I complete a project in Parker Dewey, and I'm doing these little bite-sized pieces as I'm navigating this job search, I'm going to be proud of myself, and I'm going to feel good about what I'm doing. And then that's going to help me with keeping a positive mentality as I'm looking for a new job, so that when I go to interview, I'm not, you know, like down in the dumps, like, hi, my name is Jamie, nice to meet you. I'm able to showcase some things that I've been able to do even while I've been job searching. And so it's, in my opinion, that's helping to manage some of that anxiety, because job searching is not fun. I promise. I know that. But it's really taking advantage of some of the resources. And again, those bite-sized pieces and the small accomplishments that you can achieve while you're in the midst of this search.
100%.
So make sure you go to training.dom.edu for more information. All right. So thinking about experience and keywords, right? So we talked a little bit about how you might be able to gain some of those technical skills, how you might be able to leverage the gig economy, as we call it. I also want to make sure to talk about professional organizations, because some of you guys are getting ready to graduate. And right now, and I'm going to show you the next slide where we're talking about pricing for one organization in particular. But now, especially as you're a student, I cannot talk about this enough. And I think every time I meet with a student, I mention this at least 100 times. You know, you need to get involved in professional organizations. So we'll keep going with the marketing, right? So there's the American Marketing Association. Well, if you're a member of that group, guess what? You get to put that on your resume. So Anna, you're a management major, but you did a marketing internship. You did, let's say, a LinkedIn Learning course on marketing research, and then you're now a student member of the American Marketing Association. When somebody looks at your resume, they're seeing marketing, 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 on top of the fact that you're also going to be expanding that network, right? So I pulled a couple of different, like, I swear to God, there's got to be 1,000,005 different types of professional organizations. And so I just pulled some to give you an idea of the different groups you might be a part of, right? So there's a professional organization for every profession that is out there. Johnathan, do you have anything to add to this?
No, I 100% agree. I'll even share, you know, as I have begun my own career journey, you know, having entered the workforce up some 3 years ago now. This is something that, you know, is top of mind oftentimes when I'm thinking about how do I navigate my career? Who do I talk to? What are the career opportunities in the area? Because oftentimes these organizations hear about it first. And then secondly, again, as a now employer and I would say recruiter looking at resumes quite often, again, this is something I definitely noticed that stands out. Who are the organizations that they are a part of? How are they contributing to these organizations? And 9 times out of 10, it becomes a topic of conversation. And it helps me get away from, well, do they have that experience? Because I know they're a part of this type of work.
Anna has a quick question. I'm going to unmute her. Here you go, Dana.
Sorry. Okay, so I'm a marketing major, right? And I know last year, Jamie and I talked about joining the American Marketing Association, and you were like, they have a discount for students. You should totally do it. So I went ahead and did it. I subscribed to the newsletter first. Yeah, that's kind of what it looked like. So other than, because I get their emails and it's constantly like, join us in this webinar and join us in this conference, but their conference are like $1,000 and 500, and they're so expensive for my poor college student wallet. So how can you take advantage of these organizations that have these conferences that are so expensive in other ways that it's just like, because it will be great to just stamp that on my resume, but what if I'm not using it? Like, what if I'm just paying it to have the name and the title in there rather than...
So I have a great suggestion and also a very personal example of such, Anna. One, thank you so much for sharing. And I know that that's definitely something that we oftentimes have to face. Again, as a college student, where do they think this money comes from? I am not sure. But two, when thinking about, how we invest in our education and what you all are already doing, we know that this is the thing that pays off. We know that this is where the opportunity is. And oftentimes what we, probably didn't do in our collegiate state as much as, we would have liked, but given the constraints is, that doesn't mean that we can't apply for other types of scholarships to receive those type of entry points. So one of the things that I always recommend when you think about those type of events, follow up in an email. Let them know exactly what you just said. Hey, my name is Anna. I'm a student currently at Dominican University. I'm super excited just about this opportunity. I recognize the price, but wanted to acknowledge as a college student, I currently can't afford that. Are there any scholarships or other opportunities for me to still gain, again, entry, even if it just attend the webinar for an hour, 30 minutes? Again, just put a suggestion out in the air. Let them tell you no. And you would be surprised how many people would say yes. And I'm not sure, again, if we're still talking about the power of LinkedIn, but there's a power in network and communication. So oftentimes what I would do, let's say, again, there's an organization, I'm not sure if you're aware of, they host a function called Afrotech. Blavity hosts it in San Francisco. I literally would just email the person on LinkedIn, the director of the program, let them know my situation. And for 2 years straight, I was able to get a scholarship to go. Mainly because, again, I was proactive, and 9 times out of 10, other people aren't doing that. So I would just say, be intentful and let the impact come to you.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's a great suggestion. The other thing I always tell people, to build off of what Johnathan said, if you ask people, hey, do you mind if I volunteer a couple hours at this conference? I personally have do you know how many conferences I've gotten into by doing that? So I go volunteer, let's say the conference is 3 days long. I go spend 4 or 5 hours at the registration table, because guess what? Almost every conference needs somebody helping with registration or running around. And I can't tell you how many conferences I've been able to attend for free just by putting in a couple hours of work at the front end, right? I actually did that within this past year. So there was a conference that I wanted to attend that had to do with higher education, which is what obviously my field is. And it was going to cost thousands of dollars. Well, I didn't personally have thousands of dollars. I didn't have thousands of dollars to spend in my budget. So what I did was I emailed them and I said, hey, do you need help with volunteering? I'd love to be a part of this conference, and I can certainly come in on Friday and volunteer 6 hours of time or whatever. And then I got to listen for the rest of the conference for free. So that's another it might be another way to get in, but I definitely like Jonathan's approach, which is just ask, right? I mean, that goes back to, like, there's these scholarships that I swear to God, they just sit, nobody applies.
Yep.
So take advantage of applying to the grants and the internships, because you don't know what's going to happen.
Shoot your shot.
There you go. So I'm pulling this up because Anna, I'm happy to hear that you are a member of AMA, but I'm hoping you'll use it now. So the point is $417 a month for a student membership versus $1242 a month. The other thing I want to point out, so going back to what Johnathan just said, Dominican University does have some grants, right? So if there's a will, there's a way, but you have to ask the question. So am I guaranteeing that I can get everybody into a professional organization? No, but I think all of you know this by now. If you ask the question and you do the work, we're going to try to figure it out for you. So don't let your budget stand in the way, is what I'm getting at. There's always a way around it. There's always a way to do things. Okay.
Jamie, real quick, there was a question or a comment Daisy. I'll unmute her. Okay.
Daisy.
Thank you. So I had a question more tailored to in terms of resumes. So it's most focused on how nowadays most companies are using softwares to just get quickly through the resume process. And from your experience, both I would like to hear both sides, Jonathan and also Jamie. Would you recommend us to keep our resume format as simplest as possible, or is it okay just to as that way of going through the system? Do you recommend us to change it up a little bit, not just to look like the regular traditional resume format? That's my question.
I was going to say great question, and I think it ties into the next few slides as well. So probably helpful to go through those, and just want to definitely be mindful of time for the group. So I think in terms of the slide, Jamie, and what we were literally just going to speak to, Daisy, is that, most recruiters and most organizations are going to give your resume about 6 seconds of time. Are there systems in which organizations or company use to look through resumes? Yes and no. Oftentimes your ATS system really houses all of the resumes. How those recruiters leverage it oftentimes looks different. So again, thinking about how I was saying that recruiters would leverage LinkedIn, they do the same thing on these systems with your resume. They look for keywords, or they look for key majors or things of that nature to filter and make their group smaller. Again, thinking about a Harvard, if I got 1 million applications and I only can accept 1,000, there's certain things I know that these certain resumes have to have. And that's what you have to also have the mind set up. Personally, for myself, in the way that we're also recruiting at Relativity, again, yes, we have an ATS system that houses all the applications, but oftentimes recruiters are still scanning your resumes manually. Don't think that, again, there's some system that just, kicks you out automatically. Oftentimes in the scan, it's just that they look for certain information. So they're going to look for your name. They're going to look for the experience. They want to see where you went to school, and oftentimes the major, and sometimes not your major. And then oftentimes too, they want to see if you have any volunteer experience. If your resume is there, what are the other types of ways that you've gone about gaining experience or working or build some of those soft and hard skills? Jamie, not sure if you have anything to add there.
Thank you.
Yeah, I just think it's important, so you got to keep in mind where you're applying. So that's so important, because the resume is going to get scanned, but the resume, so a lot of times we've got all of our students that are so focused on the resume, which your resume is super important, do not get me wrong, but it's one part of your entire application. And so some other things that we want to make sure to talk about, because we talked a bit about resume and LinkedIn, I want to make sure that we're talking about your cover letter too, which sometimes can really make the case for somebody having a conversation with you. So the way that I describe resumes is strategically placed objective information. So we're not lying about it, right? You want to make sure your dates are accurate. You want to make sure you're describing the positions and the accomplishments as accurately as possible. Where you get to be more subjective and where you get to maybe tell some of your stories in that cover letter. So thinking about why this job, how does your experience translate? So if you're going from political science and you're going into sales, how does that translate? How did you get from political science to sales? The cover letter, that's really where you get to showcase your communication skills. So I always say talk is cheap, show me. Well, the cover letter, you're showing them. You're literally providing them with an example of your writing. And then you can also communicate in that document any red flags. So if there's ever an option for you to include a cover letter, obviously you want to make sure that it's well written. You want to make sure that there's no grammatical errors or anything like this. But that is where you get to showcase those skills. And if you need to absolutely, if it's an optional, include a cover letter.
Yeah, cannot plus one everything that Jamie has said enough. I think, other than what she already has shared, something else that I will add is, your cover letter is there to complement your resume. Oftentimes when people build out their resume, they really are regurgitating the description of the job. But we all know oftentimes you're doing a lot more work than that job typically is having asked of you. You're taking on different projects. You're working with various teams. You're working cross-functionally. You might have been asked to plan something, gaining more experience than you would have thought. being able to have space to articulate that is so important, and that's the value of your cover letter.
So we've got, I got a couple of sample resumes that I was going to show you, but I really want to be mindful of time. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share these out to you. One is an example of a student that she just, in my opinion, killed it in her cover letter. And it's really, really well written. She took into account the company culture, which I think is huge. She showed her research on the company. I mean, you can't read this this cover letter rather. You know she wanted it, right? Just by this one-page document. So I'm going to make sure to share those with you guys, but I want to keep going for the sake of time. So those will be coming in an email. So I'm going to ask Bianca, just make sure, can you make sure we get everybody on the call? Cool. All right. So quickly, so that we have a minute or two for questions. Something that Jonathan and I were also talking about these past couple of days were applications. So if there is a supplemental question, if they ask you anything that says, oh, can you demonstrate your skill set in A, B, or C? Or I've seen on applications, can you talk about your experience working with diverse groups that might be different than your own? Do not, unless it's, in which case, if it's a supplemental question, 99.9% of the time, you cannot answer not applicable, right? So don't say NA. I promise you there's something you can come up with. And if they give you 200 words, use every single word you can. Again, go back to the cover letter. This is for you. This is your time to shine. So use it.
I can't harp on that enough. Even, in our application, something we've seen is the difference between people who leave the bare minimum and those who are putting in a lot of energy into that one response or two response application is those are individuals that are also going to bring that attitude to work. So you don't want to, again, count yourself out early on because you chose to give a 1 or 2 sentence response. Be exhaustive. Think of that cover letter style and being able to explain, again, yourself.
Well, I can't have a presentation without talking about my dog. So I just wanted to make sure to highlight and stress, it's so important to build relationships, especially during this time, because those relationships you build, that's how you're getting the job. So this is why we talk about networking so much and going to things and going to events and saying hi and asking questions. I'm going to let Jonathan quickly talk about the 70%, 30% at the top of the screen. And then just want to make sure to say, if I know you, I would likely interview you for my dog walking job, even if I don't know that you have dog walking skills and can handle a 150-pound dog, right? So even if I don't know you have that skill set, I'm going to talk to you. So I told Jonathan, I'm not sure that he wants the job, but I said, even knowing him for these few weeks, if he applied to my dog walking job, and you guys know how I feel about Lulabelle and Floyd too, I would have the conversation with him simply because we have a relationship established, right? So I'm going to let Jonathan talk about the 70-30.
And, I will happily accept that job, Jamie. When thinking about, building relationships are everything. Oftentimes at LinkedIn, we would share a statistic with companies that was a bit of a shock to them, but they also knew. And it's that most organizations around the globe, when it comes to, talent flows and where their talent comes from, about 30% of their talent typically is going to come from a job board. So when they happen to just find out, happen to see the opportunity and apply, 70% of the talent within someone's organization is going to come from referrals, meaning people know other people for the jobs, people who wanted to help someone within their network gain an opportunity. So again, when you think about the value of first impressions and, again, sharing with people your aspirations, think about your future jobs and think about the jobs you have now. Think about the positions that people are in and how they navigate their careers, because you never know, your next job may be 1 to 2 to 3 degrees of a network away.
All right, so I'm going to skip real quick from Q&A over here. So I want to make sure, because Jonathan's got to hop off promptly at 3:30. I can stick around for a couple questions, but he's going to be with us tonight. He's got a webinar. I'm going to let Jonathan talk a little bit about it.
Yeah. So again, thank you so much, Jamie and team, for having Relativity on today to just discuss, again, career opportunities and development. As Jamie pointed out, Relativity, we currently are hiring for our fellows program, which is a 5-month experience where our mission is actually to find, certify, and train individuals from communities that have been traditionally overlooked to obtain careers in e-discovery technology or litigation support. With that said, this afternoon, everyone will have an opportunity to just hear from the team about Relativity, the fellows program, and how to apply. And then also, if I can just, again, say thank you to you all and being so attentive. I don't think, again, the workforce would be anything without you. So really, really, really shoot your shot, ask lots of questions, reach out to people in your network. Think of me as an extension of your networks as well. And I hope to at least have 10 connections on LinkedIn tonight so that we can definitely continue to get to know one another.
So if you guys want more information on how to access the webinar that Jonathan's going to be on tonight, it's on Handshake, of course. You know it's on Handshake. And then here's obviously our contact information. I'll stick around. I'm going to stop recording. But thank you so much to Jonathan. It's been a lot of fun building this out with you. And I know you've got to hop, but I just want to make sure to thank you again. And I look forward to seeing you again tonight.
Thank you so much, Jamie.
Absolutely.